You are bleeding right now, and somewhere, a system exists to help you deal with it quietly. A pad, a tampon, a wrapper you barely think about. Now imagine none of that exists. No plastic, no cotton industry, no pharmacy aisle. Just you, your body, and 4,000 years of women who solved this exact problem before you were born. You'd assume they suffered in silence, improvised in shame, bled through their clothes, and hoped no one noticed. But the real answer is far stranger. The women of ancient Egypt did not hide their periods. In many ways, they understood their bodies better than most of the ancient world did. And some of what they invented still echoes in the products sitting in your bathroom cabinet right now. Start with the obvious question. What did they actually use? Historians have spent decades trying to answer this, and the honest truth is that no one found a perfectly preserved ancient Egyptian pad in a tomb. Blood doesn't survive 4,000 years. Cloth rarely does either. So researchers had to piece together the evidence from fragments. Literal fragments. At a village called Deir el-Medina, the workers' town built for the artisans who carved the tombs in the Valley of the Kings, archaeologists found something unusual: laundry lists. Written on broken pieces of pottery called ostracon, these lists tracked household textiles, and among them were references to cloths used specifically during menstruation. Egyptologist Terry Wilfong, who has spent years studying daily life at Deir el-Medina, analyzed one of these ostracon in detail. It's catalogued as OIM 13512, and it does something remarkable. It tracks 8 women moving in and out of a specific location, over specific days, in a pattern that lines up almost perfectly with menstrual cycles. Wilfong called this pattern menstrual synchrony. The record suggested these women were going somewhere together, a place referred to in the texts as the place of women. What was that place? Nobody is completely sure, and that uncertainty is where things get interesting. Archaeologist Lynn Meskell proposed that small rooms at the back of houses in Deir el-Medina may have served as these spaces. Somewhere private, somewhere set apart from daily household activity. Not a punishment, not a prison, possibly closer to a retreat. Because here's what a lot of people get wrong about ancient menstrual practices. They assume seclusion always meant shame. In many ancient cultures, it did. But in ancient Egypt, the picture is more complicated and arguably more respectful than that. Menstrual blood in ancient Egyptian belief wasn't something dirty to be hidden. It was tied to fertility, to the cycles of the Nile itself, which flooded and receded in its own rhythm every year. Danish Egyptologist John Frandsen, who wrote extensively on menstrual taboo in ancient Egyptian texts, found something surprising when he dug into the language itself. The old assumption, carried over from Greek and later Western thought, was that menstruation was universally treated as polluting. But Frandsen's research showed the Egyptian relationship with menstrual blood was layered. It carried power. Sometimes it appears in medical texts as an ingredient, believed to hold protective or healing properties. Think about that for a second. A substance modern culture spent centuries hiding was, in ancient Egypt, sometimes viewed as medicine. So what did they actually put in their bodies, or against their bodies, to manage the bleeding? This is where the evidence gets genuinely strange. There's a persistent claim, repeated across documentaries and articles for decades, that ancient Egyptian women invented the tampon using softened papyrus. It's a satisfying story. Papyrus was everywhere in Egypt. It practically writes its own myth. But when historians actually trace this claim back to its source, it falls apart. The origin isn't an Egyptian medical papyrus at all. It traces back centuries later to Hippocrates, the Greek physician, who described a very different material used by Greek women, not Egyptian ones. Somewhere along the way, in translation and retelling, the story got relocated to Egypt because Egypt already had a reputation for ancient ingenuity. It's a myth that survived because it sounded plausible, not because it was documented. So if not papyrus tampons, then what? The laundry lists at Deir el-Medina point somewhere more grounded: cloth, linen, specifically, which Egypt produced in enormous quantities and which was already the fabric of daily life, from clothing to bedding to the wrappings used in mummification. Menstrual cloths would have been folded, worn, washed, and reused. Not glamorous, not mysterious, just practical, sustainable, and woven into the same textile economy that clothed the entire civilization. There's also mention, in some translations of household inventories, of garments described in the Satire of the Trades, an ancient Egyptian text listing various professions and daily struggles, that reference clothing worn specifically during menstruation. It's brief, it's not detailed, but it confirms something important. This wasn't invisible. It was recorded, tracked, and planned around, the same way any other domestic necessity was. Now here's a question worth sitting with. If menstruation was tracked, planned around, even given its own physical space, does that mean ancient Egyptian women had it easier than women in later, more advanced eras? In some ways, yes, and that's uncomfortable, because it breaks the story we like to tell ourselves about progress moving in a straight line. Classicist Elena Nifosi's research on women in Greco-Roman Egypt found a striking shift over time. Before Greek and Roman rule, Egyptian women held property rights, could initiate divorce, and functioned with a level of legal independence that was unusual for the ancient world. Menstruation, childbirth, and coming of age were documented as normal biological events, not moral failures. But when Greek and then Roman customs took hold in Egypt, that independence eroded. Attitudes imported from Greek medical thought, much of it treating the female body as inherently unstable or inferior, began reshaping how menstruation itself was perceived. In other words, things didn't get more enlightened with time. For Egyptian women, in this specific case, they got worse. Why does that matter to you? Right now, in a century, with pain relief and disposable products and search engines that answer any medical question in seconds. Because the shame isn't ancient. It's not something humanity has always carried and slowly overcome. Ancient Egypt suggests something closer to the opposite. Shame around menstruation was, in part, imported, layered on later by cultures that viewed the female body with more suspicion than the Nile Valley ever did. Every month, your body does something it has done for the entire span of human history, unchanged, unbothered by whatever era surrounds it. The materials change. Linen becomes cotton, becomes plastic, becomes silicone. But the body underneath all of it is running the same 4,000-year-old rhythm the women of Deir el-Medina tracked on broken pottery, in their own handwriting, without a single ounce of the shame you might have been taught to feel. You are bleeding right now, and somewhere, in the fragments of a workers' village on the edge of the Valley of the Kings, a system existed to help someone deal with it too, quietly, practically, and maybe, in ways modern history forgot to mention, without any shame at all.